Let's talk about all of these developments with my next guest, Democratic Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. He's the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, also a member of the Senate Committee on Intelligence, ex officio, I think.
Ex officio.
Is that the official title?
That's the official
But you were
title.
on the Intelligence Committee as well. So what's your level of concern about this meeting that the president's oldest son had together with the then campaign chairman and the senior advisor, the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, with this Russian lawyer?
It's very serious.
Why?
Well, first, the whole pretense of the meeting, and the Sun has indicated, was to get information from the Russian government deleterious to Hillary Clinton. That's essentially going to a foreign power and asking for help in the election. That was the pretense, and that's already been admitted.
He tweeted this morning, Donald Trump Jr.,
Yes.
the oldest son, he tweeted, obviously he was being sarcastic in this tweet, obviously I'm the first person on a campaign to ever take a meeting to hear info about an opponent. Went nowhere, but had to listen. So he's saying, and some of his supporters, Trump supporters, are saying it was opposition research. That's what all campaigns do. Non-operations research based on Russian intelligence. That's the difference. This was an individual who had clear and close ties to the Russian government, to their intelligence services, perhaps. We don't know. We have to probe that. But this was not a meeting with an American political activist, someone who was a part of the campaign. And it was a very, very particular meeting. It involved the three principals, Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, and Donald Trump Jr. This was not a casual sort of meeting. This was very deliberate. When you have the three most significant people in the campaign at that juncture. You've done some research. What do we know about this lawyer, this Russian lawyer, who came to this meeting, her last name, Vetselnskaya?
Very little at this point, frankly. That's going to be one of those issues that we will take up. I'm sure the Intelligence Committee will start taking it up. Apparently, from what I've read in the press, she was very active in the trying to reverse the legislation that caused the Russians to stop their adoption program.
The Magnitsky Act.
The Magnitsky Act, but she seems to be someone who's been described publicly as having very close ties to the Kremlin and very active on behalf of the Kremlin. And that was, I'm sure, part of her attraction to the campaign.
So are you going to call it, as a part of your Intelligence Committee investigation, Donald Trump Jr. to come before the committee and testify?
I hope so. Senator Collins, my colleague, another member of the Intelligence Committee, has already made that claim. I think it's appropriate that he does that to clear this up.
What about Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner?
I think we have been trying to pursue both Mr. Manafort and Mr. Kushner to come and testify. That's being led by the Chairman Burr and Ranking Member Mark Warner of Virginia. But we are doing that. And in addition, I'm sure this is falling under the ambit of the special prosecutor. He has to be interested in this, too, because of his mandate to go and see if there are connections between the Trump campaign and the Russian government.
Do you know if there were any follow-up meetings? This meeting, apparently, if you listen to what Donald Trump Jr. is saying, maybe lasted 20 minutes or half an hour. Do you know if there were any follow-up meetings to this, similar to this, or going even further?
I don't, but this is also part of a troubling pattern of not acknowledging a meeting, then acknowledging a meeting, and discover that there are other meetings that were acknowledged. That took place with General Flynn, took place with Attorney General Sessions, who initially didn't indicate he met with the Russian ambassador. So this is a troubling pattern of behavior where more and more comes out about more extensive meetings or meetings with other people on the same subject.
Yeah, there was just also some additional meetings that initially didn't come up involving Jared Kushner,
exactly,
the son-in-law as well. You issued a statement following the president's meeting with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and you wrote this: President Trump may have accepted Putin's assurances that Russia did not meddle in the U.S. presidential election, but I can assure you that the American people do not share his confidence in Mr. Putin's claims. The crucial work of U.S. intelligence agencies, law enforcement, the special counsel, and bipartisan congressional panels will continue until we get to the bottom of what happened and can help prevent continued Russian interference in future democratic elections. What do you know actually emerged from the extensive conversation that these two presidents, Putin and Trump, had on Russian meddling?
Well, it's hard to know definitively because there were only 4 people, principals in the room and 2 translators, and there's various stories. What I think was a huge missed opportunity, and I think it was before the meeting, the president would have been better served, and we would have been better served if, instead of trying to make an arrangement with the Russians who penetrated our election, he had stood with our traditional allies, Democratic countries, France, Germany, and others, called out
the Russians, and then went into that meeting with a solid assurance that the international community was rejecting Russian involvement in democratic elections, and we wouldn't tolerate it, and make that demand. He avoided that. He didn't do that. He went in, listened to Putin, and apparently one side thinks everything's okay, and the other side wants to get on. His comments are, let's get on with business with the Russians, rather than let's stop them from interfering in our elections.
Yeah, he did tweet at one point on that cybersecurity issue. This is the president. The fact that President Putin and I discussed a cybersecurity unit doesn't mean I think I can. It doesn't mean I think it can happen. It can't. But a ceasefire can and did. You welcome the achievement of a ceasefire.
The ceasefire is very important. Any step in Syria to lower the level of violence, to also take the pressure off the Jordanians, because it's right along the Jordanian border. The more difficult issues will be the area not there along the Jordanian border, but in the Euphrates Valley along Syria-Iraqi border. That's where ISIS is retreating to. That's where our surrogate forces are headed. That's where the Assad regime is headed, the Iranians and the Russians. That's really going to be the test case.
Senator Jack Reed, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Always good to have you here on the program.